Hello, Alan here. Today I'm going to go over the my top 10 favorite books of 2022. Now, these aren't books that came out in 2022. I think a couple of them are, but of ones that I read in 2022. I read 40 in 2022. I read 50 the year prior, so I slacked off. Actually, I made the point of reading longer books, so that's the so anyway, there are three fiction, seven nonfiction books. I'm gonna go through. They're not going to be in any order, except for the top two, the top fiction, top nonfiction. Okay. So I'm just gonna start doing the fiction, the nonfiction, then I'll give the final two. All right, let's go for the fiction. Heir to the Empire. I'd that show with Father James in early 2021, and I'm like, I need to get reading these books. I need to. If I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. Saying you don't have time is an excuse because if you truly want something, you're going to make time. So I made time, and I was not disappointed. There's a few other Star Wars books I read too, but in fact, I think I read probably seven this year, but I think this one has to be my favorite, although there was some stiff competition for my favorite. This book is also the perfect book is if you want to get started in the expanded universe of Star Wars, what's called Legends. That's the old Star Wars canon pre Disney. It's called Legends. If you take a look, I actually got a non-legend book for Christmas. You notice they don't have the bar at the top. Yellow bar signifies that it's part of Legends, also the old canon or expanded universe. So, yeah, no, just if you want to get into Star Wars, perfect place to start is Heir to the Empire. All right, another fiction book. You probably questioned why me as a Christian read this book because it's kind of inappropriate, kind of racy. It kind of deals with a lot of non-Christian stuff, and that is it's an old book from the 60s, Valley of the Dolls. This is a book from the 60s, and it's called The Dolls because the dolls are pills. You see pills on the back, a lot of drugs, and this made me wow, it concerned me, the stuff they go through, and it really covers a lot of drug addiction and how they have to go to the clinic to get off the addiction, and it shows the inner workings of show business, and how nasty things can get in show business in places like New York and LA, and like just how nasty and cutthroat it can get, um, and how just oh man, it's yeah. So I don't know if I'd recommend this one. It's a good read. It's by Jacqueline Suzanne, who passed away in the 1970s from Breast cancer. She was still fairly young at the time, unfortunately, and she wrote a couple books after this that also became bestsellers. By the way, this book is a mega bestseller. It sold over 30 million copies. It's one of the highest selling books of the 20th century. Um, and she's written other books as well. Um, yeah, but it's a bit racy, shall we say. We'll just leave it at that. All right, next book. We're going to some nonfiction now. As you can guess, a lot of history. So, Swetonius, Lives of the Caesars. I've made a point of reading a lot of history of Roman history pre-Christ. Now, he lived in the second century, the late first, early second century. So he's after Christ, but he chronicles pre-Christ, and like it's good because I kind of want to get to the uh to like put myself in the Roman Empire in the time of Christ or shortly before Christ or even shortly after Christ when the Christian movement was still um a small movement in Palestine and slowly expanding out. Like like when Saint Paul uh, goes to goes to Greece and he preaches there. What kind of environment is it? Like I want to learn this stuff, and as a historian myself, I want to learn about it from the earliest sources. I'm going to read more this year, probably some Tacitus, which I have over there, and there's other sources as well. So yeah, no, a great book. And Swetonius, although he is a competent historian, he has the reputation for being a bit gossipy. He's the National Enquirer of the ancient world. So yeah, no, it goes through the 12 Caesars. It goes through Julius Caesar, goes through Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Nero. You know that Nero was married to a man or a boy. He was uh, the name. You can type this into Google, look it up on Wikipedia. The guy's name was Sporus, Sporus. The ancient Rome, pre-Christian Roman Empire had gay marriage, and Nero and Sporus is proof of that. There's a lot of other disturbing stuff here with Tiberius, and yeah, no, but it's a fun read. It's a really fun read. If you want to study classics, the ancient world, the world that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was born into, the world where the first Christians were. This is about the Roman Empire. Now it's about the whole empire, not Palestine per se, but no, it's absolutely fantastic. Go read this book. You need to read this book if you're going to study antiquity. Now on to some medieval stuff. Now this isn't a church history, but essentially it's in a time where church was super important to society. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It's a medieval English chronicle. It's an early source as well, and it kind of goes through England. Talks about all the kings leading up to the Norman conquest, and even after the Norman conquest for a bit. Yeah, no, it's quite good. I blew through this. It's very well done. You know, it's got the years here, and it's got all the stuff that year. Um, no, it's fascinating. Church and state and army. It gives a lot of history here. So that's good. Now let's get back to some strict church history. Um, now lot of you guys have read Ecclesiastical History of the English People by St. Bede the Venerable. Yeah, that's good. And he chronicles from St. Augustine of Canterbury all the way to a couple years before he dies. He dies in 735. I think the chronicles go up to like 732 or 730 or something like that. But there's still a lot of time between that and the medieval church. So where do you go? I'll tell you where to go. You go right here to William of Malmsbury, the deeds of the bishops of England, called the Gesta Pontificum Anglorum. And he's a 12th century historian who guides, basically goes back to around the time of Bede the Venerable, and basically cranks the clock forward slowly. And yeah, no, it's a great read. It's a great read to fill that gap of what happened after Bede's Chronicle finishes. Now, we're going to get into some Byzantine history. I read a book called The Deeds of John Emmanuel Comnenus. Now, it's about the first Comnenus emperor. Well, there's technically a guy in the 11th century, but that was just kind of a one-off. The Comnenus dynasty starts with Alexius I. His name's going to come up later in this video. So that's Alexius Comnenus. He dies in 1118. His son John Comnenus is Byzantine emperor from 1118 to 1143, and then Manuel Comnenus is emperor from 1143 to 1180. And so you can find all of this stuff in the lives of John and the deeds of John and Manuel Comnenus by John Kinemus, who I believe was a monk from those days. Now, just need some water here. There we go. Now, about 90% of this book is manual. The part with John is like 15 pages, like it's 200 pages. About 15 pages are John, all the rest are manual. But if you want a good corroborating source, do get the Chronicle of Nicetas Cognatus. I have it on my shelf over there. That's expensive, that book. Actually, so is this. But no, it's a very important time. I love 12th century Byzantium because I like the Fourth Crusade, 1204, Constantinople sacked. I like knowing the politics leading up from the start of the First Crusade all the way to that Fourth Crusade. Oh, getting all right. We got the correspondence of Pope Gregory the Seventh. These are the letters of Pope Gregory the Seventh. It's not all of them, obviously, but it's a lot of them. And he's writing to various monarchs, various archbishops, various churchmen or monks or abbots. And no, there's a lot of good stuff. It sure puts you in the church in the 1170s and 80s. Basically, Henry IV, his dealings with Henry IV, the Holy Roman Emperor, who was a very nasty guy. He used to be best friends with him. If you read some of these letters, they were so close. It was like Anakin and Obi-Wan, but we know how that turned out. Turns out the same way with Henry IV and Gregory VII. And you can read all this stuff, and you also know the relationship between the Latin and the Greek church and the Latin and the Armenian church, where they different, because he talks about it in his letters. He really goes after the vernacular liturgy in here. Like, I think it was the king of Hungary. I think it was the king of Hungary. Can't remember his name, but it's like, hey, why can't we do the liturgy in the vernacular? Why Latin? And he just roasts the vernacular liturgy. Yeah, interesting. Wonder if Pope Francis would like a word with him. Anyway, so that was, yeah, that's good. All right, fun time. So get those, not that expensive either. Last is a book I didn't even know existed till like a month and a half ago. And that is the Chronicles of Jean Frassar. Now, apparently it's not the whole chronicle. The whole chronicle is like thousands of pages, but it has a lot of things during the 100 Years' War. And during the 100 Years' War, which starts in 1337, keep in mind the papacy's in France at this point due to several circumstances. And this book, it's not that expensive. It's a Penguin book, so it's like $15 or $20 Canadian, probably a bit less American. And in 1378, what's important about that year, guys? The Pope goes back to Rome. He dies, then a new pope's elected, and then a bunch of rogue cardinals go back to Avignon and elect their own pope. And there's about 10 pages here where it discusses it in depth what happens. The price of this book is worth those 10 pages alone are worth the price of the book, because you can learn so much. Of course, I knew what generally happened, but this gives you the specifics from a contemporary source. Jean Frassar, who was a priest during that time. He dies in the early 1400s. So he obviously chronicles the first two phases of the 100 Years' War. There's three main phases. The third phase starts in, I think, 1415. That's where you get the famous Battle of Agincourt, which is probably the best battle of the 100 Years' War. Although Some good battles are chronicled in this Battle of Cressy and the Battle of Poitiers. Those are pretty darn good battles too. Basically, the Years' War put the nail in the coffin on chivalry. By the end of the um, uh, of 100 Years' War, knights were obsolete as a military unit. And it all started at the Battle of Cressy in 1346. That's Cressy, Crecy. And there's a ton of information on it in here. And basically, it's the first time the longbow was used in battle uh, by the English against the French. The French had their Frankish charge with their knights, and the knights, which always defeated their enemy, were obliterated. It wasn't even close by peasants with longbows. Yeah, pretty scandalous. Anyway, this is a good source. I guess it's, I don't know, 1300s. Is that medieval? I guess it's like high Middle Ages. All right, last two books. We will start out with my first fiction book, Where the Crawdads Sing, #1 fiction book. This came out in 2018, and it's it got made into a movie. The movie's not bad. It's not bad, but the part with the courtroom, that was not as well done. But the part where she's, growing up in the marsh and all that stuff. No, it's a fascinating story. The person who wrote this book was a professor of zoology or biology or something like that, and she lived in and she like had only published textbooks all her life. Then she retired from being a professor, and then to fill the time, she decided to write a novel. And 15 million copies later, you have Where the Crawdads Sing. It's about a girl growing up in the swamps of North Carolina, or is it South Carolina? It's in one of the Carolinas, but no, it's North Carolina. It's great book. Growing up in the marsh, and it's 60s, so there's still a lot of racial tension. So yeah, no, it's interesting. Great book. Great book. Favorite novel of the year. My favorite nonfiction book of the year, and probably my favorite book of the year. You guys probably guessed it. The Alexia by Anna Komnene, a biography. It's a medieval biography of that Anna Komnene does of her father. It's almost 500 pages, which is insanely long for a medieval biography. Her father's Alexius Comnenus, Byzantine Emperor, 1081 to 1118, and you get to know a lot about his life. It's very detailed, and I think historians consider this to be a pretty accurate account. She had access to all the documents of the palaces of Constantinople. And you get to learn, in terms of church history, you get to learn a lot about the role the emperor played in uh, the church. The church. He essentially ran the church. He was the Pope of the Orthodox Church. A lot of Orthodox don't know this, but he ran their church. If he disagreed with the bishop on issues of doctrine, the emperor always won. In fact, in this other book I recommended, 3 Comnenuses here, Comnenoi, uh, there's a lot of that information here. But it's not just that. It's also a Greek account of the First Crusade. It's also the amount of wars that it documents, the wars that Alexius uh, uh, fought, especially against Bohemian, and it actually transcribes in this the the surrender, or the yeah, his concession document that Bohemond had to sign, and it was humiliating. and this thing basically it shows what he had to sign. Yeah, no, it was, oh man, this is an absolute great, and it has a lot of inner workings of the of Byzantine society. And at the beginning, it shows how um he got to power, because at that time in the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire was essentially falling apart. There's a lot of internal facts. It was essentially Game of Thrones, essentially. So yeah, so this book is the book of the year, the Alexiad. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people, when they read this book, will get bored unless you love Byzantine history and love medieval history. You're not going to get past 100 pages. You have to be a big nerd for medieval Byzantine history. But just the writing is just beautiful. Oh man, and just so much good stuff here. Like she's the way she describes people, describes her mom, and talks about how much of a Christian her father was, how he wanted to evangelize the Islamic people. He was a student of the scriptures himself. He was a theologian. He studied the scriptures. He studied the church fathers. His famous church, his favorite church father was Saint Maximus the Confessor. He was a big fan of his, and he actually headed the Inquisition against a group of heretics called the Pogomils. Yeah, no, this is amazing book. It's a cheap book too, if you want it. It's a source in medieval Byzantium that's cheap, and there's not a lot of cheap sources of medieval Byzantium. Again, I paid quite a bit for this. The Deeds of John Emanuel Comnenus, and I bought it used. So that'll tell you how much that is. But oh yeah, so this is all the books I read in or my favorite books I read in 2022. If you have a favorite book you'd like to recommend, put it in the comments. And yeah, I look forward to a great year of YouTube. I foresee great things. All right, guys, God bless. I'm out.